And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Now, the cancellation of the highly anticipated Ramstein Summit, where global leaders were set to discuss Ukraine's defense and future, has raised significant concerns about ongoing security in Europe and continued aid for Kyiv. President Joe Biden's decision to postpone his trip due to domestic hurricane response has left questions about the future of the meeting and its potential impact on Ukraine's war strategy. Joining us today on TVP World to explore these developments is Wojciech Przybylski, Editor-in-Chief of Visegrad Insight. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So first, can you help us set the background? How critical was the Ramstein Summit to European security and for Ukraine's defensive efforts?
Well, it is unknown. It will remain unknown. This is part of the regular coordination of allies of the West that want to support Ukraine. But the gossip around the Ramstein Summit has been developing in the recent weeks and days about the possibility of exerting additional pressure on Ukraine to accept more uncomfortable demands from the West to end the war. That speculation now definitely will be cut short, and there will be no pressure by the West. But there will be also no pressure on those leaders in the West that would like this scenario to play forward. As we hear, for instance, from President of Finland, Mr. Stubb, there is still criticism of some of the Western partners, including US, to allow Ukraine to fight with one hand tied in the back, not allowing the full use of the weaponry at the disposal of Ukraine today that comes from Western resource, but also being too cautious about Russia threats and intimidations in the war on Ukraine and on the rest of the West.
Right. You brought up some of the gossips that are being circulated around what will be discussed during the meeting. And, well, this iteration of the Ramstein meeting is particularly focused on because Zelenskyy was supposed to propose his victory plan to the world leaders. What do you think it entails, and how do you think this might affect this kind of international solidarity around Zelenskyy's victory plan?
Well, Zelensky's victory plan is very closely tied to his narrative plan about the peace in Ukraine. There is no victory without stable peace. The stable peace is conditional on reclaiming the territories that currently are occupied by Russia, and Ukraine wants them back in order to have a just peace. It doesn't want to keep the territories of Russia. It doesn't want to keep control of the Kursk province that it partly controls since a couple of weeks already, a month already. So what Ukraine is proposing is essentially get Russia out of the territory that it unlawfully occupies, unless we want the international system go into shatter. We cannot accept, and the West cannot accept, a situation in which the brute power, dictates the geopolitics of the world order, rather than a set of international norms backed by force, backed by military might that is superior in the West over Russia. So Zelenskyy is building and capitalizing on what West does best, which is tying interests and values together, and refers to our own strategies in building his own victory plan, which is merely reclaiming conditions for a stable peace in Ukraine and in Europe.
Right. So like you mentioned, this kind of might makes right sort of mentality shouldn't be able to stand it in the West. However, like also you mentioned that perhaps some of the Western allies of Ukraine are trying to slowly pressure Zelenskyy into ceding some ground. Do you see these two kind of incentives butting heads eventually, and someone has to give?
Well, we will see one of the such potentialities of the West going away. We'll see what will replace them, whether it is going to be President Harris or President Trump. From the newest book by Bob Woodward, we know that there is that Russia managed to scare U.S. administration with its initial threats. The estimates of Russia response, including nuclear weapons use, has been over-evaluated by U.S. administration. escalation, and therefore the scale of the response and the belief in Ukraine victory from the very beginning has been undermined, and that shows the power of disinformative narrative spread by Russia all across the West through its regular diplomatic means, through the TV anchors, and through the hybrid means or simply illegal ways of influencing our public debates in an assessment of the reality. So Russia is more scary by its threats and posture rather than actual hardware and abilities to conduct warfare. We see that by inability to control any meaningful city in the east of Ukraine, despite supposedly superior power, military power in the past two years. And the US administration in particular, but also we will see a change in the German administration a year after, in fall next year. Hopefully the war does not continue that long, but we should definitely be prepared for such eventuality. These will be offering chances to reevaluate the strategy of the West that needs to bring back the thinking about, well, putting the best of our industries at work for backing up our ideals of democracy, freedoms, and values. Without this kind of backing for Ukraine, or without this kind of backing for ourselves, they will be meaningless, and therefore the project of the United West, United Europe, for instance, is in jeopardy. So, in short, U.S. administration change will be it Harris or be it Trump, bring an evaluation of the strategy and continuation of the effort on Ukraine.
Right. I think re-evaluation is a very key term here. And we see as Ukraine's incursion into Kursk, which with Russia not really responding as aggressively as many would think, kind of does give a good showcase of a lot of the Russian threats being more, well, more noise than actually anything potentially, well, threatening. But do you think that, well, perhaps a new administration coming in will see it the way it is, or perhaps some of these hybrid warfare and information warfare, like you mentioned, will still have the same stranglehold on the broader West as a whole?
Hopefully not. And here new initiatives come from Europe, including the Transatlantic Strategic Communication Initiative, a white paper proposed by Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski to Europe to explain the situation better from the European perspective to the US administration. There are also gradual and advancing efforts on containing disinformation on both sides of the Atlantic. There is coordinated action by different governments to tackle this problem, but there is also a learning curve, and there is a ability of the administrations to innovate. I think, be it in the future Harris or be it Trump, there are goods and bads in both choices. The potential risks on both sides are there, but we should hope and reinforce the ability of the administrations with our analysis and also with our public debates in the direction that will help them be in control and steer the Western control or influence over the world to the extent that it wants to be free.
Right. So when Biden had to kind of postpone this group meeting due to domestic hurricane issues, a lot of other world leaders subsequently said that, well, if Biden's not coming, then this doesn't really make sense for me to show up. As for one of example being the Polish president, Andrzej Duda. Do you think this is also a sign perhaps there is a little bit of wavering when it comes to the actual support for Ukraine, or is it really just kind of an isolated incident?
I think more is at play than really support or no support of Ukraine. The ways of offering new financial means, military, the material that Ukraine needs, but also the ability to have an offer for a very difficult winter that might be coming to Ukraine in terms of energy supplies, and also sheltering potential wave of winter, heating refugees who might be coming. These are the difficult tasks that the West need to discuss. Just like in Europe, we have been missing a discussion in the eve of the invasion 2022, that what Europe could do. And apart from deliveries, arms deliveries, one primary thing that caught us by surprise, and it shouldn't, was how do we build welcoming centers, the refugee response. And we've seen that, be it Polish government or any other government in the EU, we were not really well prepared for it. So I think these coordination meetings, these discussions are more about nitty-gritty of how do we provide meaningful and timely response in the given circumstances that are coming, rather than this big, division of the world into those peaceful territories or those dependent on the Moscow's might combined with Chinese influence or not. So we're not seeing really a new Yalta. We're not seeing also a possibility of talking over the heads of Kyiv, partly because of Zelenskyy, but partly also because of the active fighting force of the civil society that supports the full integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. And this needs to be factored in the response, including public opinion of the West, which overall supports Ukraine fight for its freedom and independence across many countries where leaders are much more shy in their response.
Right, and as we see what happened in this meeting, where as soon as the United States say they're not participating, unfortunately a lot of world leaders also kind of just threw their hands up, like, well, I guess it's not happening. Do you think this also perhaps may be a sign of slight over-reliance on the United States for the defense and security of this part of the world, or am I overthinking it?
Definitely, we in Central Eastern Europe are very dependent on a US commitment, which is visible and present, as much as we're also seeing increasing commitment of many other Western European partners to the eastern flank of NATO. But that also comes with more and more support, innovative support to Ukraine. We have seen Danish initiative to procure military purchases directly from the Ukrainian industry to make it cheaper, faster, and more effective for the fighting force in Ukraine, and also saving money from the Danish taxpayer perspective. So this is a learning process all along these 2 very difficult years, over 2 years, 2.5. In which probably we'll see even more adaptation and coping strategies ahead. Europe is also bracing for its evaluation of defense capabilities. We will see more initiatives following, I believe, what Poland is now decided to have, which is increased budget for defense. A lot of countries in the Western Europe are also upgrading their budgets. This all will have, of course, also a long-time effect and not maybe immediate response. But a lot more can be done. And I think retail diplomacy has much more to do here and much more success to achieve, rather than these big summits when actually you would need to come to this summit knowing what the outcome should be with the kind of big master plan. Apparently we don't have yet a master plan for how to end this conflict and bring the peace back to Europe.
Right, and well, one of the topics that was supposed to be discussed is whether or not the Western allies will allow Ukraine to start using these long-range weapons to strike into Russia. And seeing that this meeting is now being postponed, will Ukraine be missing out on crucial time and strategically to utilize these weapons, or do you think that maybe it's not of the utmost important right now?
We see a consistent pressure on the capitals that have technological capacity to produce and provide to Ukraine these weapons that would help contain the occupation of Crimea, to hurt the logistics of Russian army beyond repair, and to essentially push out Russia from the territories it occupies. This pressure needs to continue. I think Ramstein would have provided for yet another opportunity to do so. But regardless of this Ramstein meeting, that these pressure points will continue in many other formats of government-to-government meetings and other international conferences that are just ahead of us.
Right, so definitely there's still spaces to push, even though this meeting itself is postponed. Perhaps there is still unity for Ukraine. Thank you so much for your input and insight and helping us understand this topic a little bit better. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us at TVP World. Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.